think about your lessons. More specifically, think about your grammar lessons. Are you preparing students to use English in real life, or are you preparing students to be amateur linguists? I'm Rubens Heredia, one of your Pavilion EOT vloggers, and in this series of videos we are looking at different moments in our lessons, thinking about how to make them more effective and, of course, more engaging and fun. And in this video I'd like to share with you 5 tips on how to teach grammar more effectively. You want to know how? So come with me. People tend to have strong feelings towards grammar. Some novice teachers are not confident about their own knowledge of English grammar and avoid it altogether. Others are passionately about it and devote hours and hours to studying it and a lot of classroom time explaining it. But do students really need to study grammar? I'm convinced that yes, grammar can be very helpful to our students, but maybe not for the reasons and in the way you think. So let's cut to the chase. Tip number 1, make sure that grammar is meaningful. Grammar is everywhere, and problems with grammar might lead to communication breakdown for sure. But grammar is seldom the reason why students join our lessons in the first place. Think about it this way. How often does the average person have a fun conversation with their friends about the different uses of the present perfect? Not really a topic of conversation to bring up on a typical first date, right? However, how often do people talk to their friends about their past experiences and the coolest things they have done? Much more often, right? If a speaker has a good command of the present perfect, they are more likely to describe their experiences successfully. But for our students, the grammar item is not the goal, it is just the means. So our lessons should reflect that to be more meaningful and relevant to our learners. Course syllabuses are often decided based on quote-unquote the grammar that students are supposed to learn at this level. And this grammar is often isolated and decontextualized. This is what Scott Thornbury refers to as grammar McNuggets. According to him, the commodification of grammar in the form of grammar McNuggets seems to perpetuate the prevailing transmissive model of education. Grammatical content in this sense is thus the point of departure for syllabus compilation. In order to make lessons more meaningful to students, rather than telling them, today we'll study the third conditional, tell them, today we'll learn how to describe our regrets. Of course, during the lesson, you will ask them to notice how the third conditional is formed and give them opportunities to practice the third conditional. But by shifting the focus from the name of the structure to the use of the structure, you are helping students understand the usefulness of the grammar, which can increase motivation to learn. Tip number 2, don't make it about what you know. Teachers dedicate hours and hours to professional development, which includes improving our own language awareness. This means that we gather fairly deep knowledge of grammar, and that's a good thing. However, an unwanted consequence of that is that we might end up making grammar lessons really teacher-centered, worrying about giving a small grammar lecture really. According to Bolitho and Maley, as teachers, we are often over-enthusiastic about telling and explaining rather than supporting our learners in working things out for themselves, which is the essence of discovery learning and, in language pedagogy, of an inductive approach to grammar and other formal features of language. Using an inductive approach to teaching grammar, that is, providing students with contextualized examples of use of the structure, helping them analyze the examples and notice the feature of the language, seems to lead to more chances of internalization of concepts and retentions of what students learned. So instead of explaining grammar rules in detail and asking students to apply them, do it the other way around. Let them understand how to use the grammar through guided discovery. Tip number 3. Take it easy. Remember when I said that most students are not studying because they are particularly passionate about grammar, but because they want to be able to use English to communicate in real life? Well, turns out that we can't really rely on them having a lot of background knowledge related to grammar either, right? As teachers, we talk about grammar using expert language, and that's absolutely natural. Terminology like participle, indirect object, non-defining relative clause, and adjunct might seem basic to us, but can become an extra layer of difficulties for the students. And students don't really need to know all of these terms in order to operate in English. Just like we don't need to know the jargon related to computer programmer in order to use a computer on a daily basis. Especially when we're dealing with lower levels, analyzing the grammar in expressions that students can pick up as one block or through repetition can hinder rather than help the learner. According to an article by Charlie Taylor in the May 2022 edition of Modern English Teacher, since students will acquire these early forms quickly and effortlessly, explicit instruction is not necessary and might be inadvisable. Trying to explain abstract grammatical constructs would hardly be the sort of comprehensible input beginners need to develop their language skills. Of course, there is some terminology that is useful to students and we can introduce them little by little. Just remember that what seems obvious to you might be completely meaningless to students. Tip number 4, make students personalize the grammar. We've been talking about ways to try to make grammar clearer and more memorable to the students, right? But we also need to check if students have really understood and are able to use the grammar point on their own. From my experience, one of the best ways to achieve both aims is to encourage learners to personalize the language we are teaching as often as possible. Children on a field trip are more likely to remember information about the place they visited. Students carrying out actual experiments in a lab may internalize concepts more successfully. These things happen because the student is creating their own personal connections with the subject they are studying. Giving students the chance to use the grammar to describe their own reality may lead to better internalization and retrieval of the target language in the future. Here are some actions you can take to help students personalize the grammar they learn. Elicit personal examples to check understanding. Ask students to adapt coursebook examples to make them true for them. After correcting a mistake, ask students to create an accurate sentence. Ask students to explain the grammar to their peers in their own words. Use semi-controlled practice to boost learners' confidence, and use small group discussions as freer practice in every lesson. Tip number 5, make it fun. It goes without saying that we don't really need to make life harder for anyone, right? And grammar lessons don't have to be overwhelming or difficult. Just like personalization, a sense of fun can also contribute to making lessons and grammar more memorable. The internet is full of websites, free and paid, that provide countless examples of grammar games. Games can help present, clarify, and practice the grammar item we are teaching. According to Arcayadas, here are some convincing arguments for using language learning games. They create a stress-free atmosphere in the classroom, they ensure learner involvement, motivation, and participation, they cater for mixed ability classes, they create a meaningful context for language use, and they can serve a diagnostic tool for the teacher. Okay, I get it. You don't like games. Not a problem. There are other ways in which you could make grammar lessons more fun and engaging. You can use wacky examples using the target language. You can use songs and scenes from films or series to show the grammar in context. You can even let students take over and be the teacher for the day. There are countless ways in which people have fun. And there are countless ways in which we can bring lightheartedness and joy into our classroom, even if we do have to deal with a passive voice. I hope these tips encourage you to look at grammar through a different perspective and inspire you to experiment with different ideas in your lessons. We'd love to hear from you. What are your strategies to make grammar more fun and meaningful? Sound off in the comments below. And you can also contact me on all social media at WhatIsELT. Keep learning and keep teaching.